You talking to me?
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Monday Movies, a podcast in which I am joined by Better Call Gibbsy to discuss the movies on our mind. And joining us today is a very special guest, a good friend of mine, and someone who I've been frequently collaborating with this year as a university student studying film. It's Joe Husband. Joe, how you doing?
Oh, mate, I'm groovy, mate. How are you?
All good, and we've got Gibbsy, of course, as always. Gibbsy, how you doing, mate?
I'm not doing too bad. I'm sat here with my lukewarm coffee on a lukewarm day.
On a lukewarm day, best way to describe it. I've got Red Bull as well to keep the blood pumping. But we are obviously here to discuss Back to the Future 3. It's, in my opinion, a very underrated movie because it kind of gets the grunt of the Back to the Future sequels, and that everyone loves the first movie, but everyone is always critical of the sequels. But I think it's a really nice conclusion. What do you think of it, Joe?
When people rate it, I feel like they rate it and compare it to the first one, which is a bit unfair because the first one is just a masterpiece. I have to say it. Oh, it's just such a good film, and yeah, it is a bit unfair to compare it to the first one. For me, I feel it's a very good film, and it's basically a homage to all the great Hollywood westerns back in the day, and but with their own unique spin on it, an 80s spin. You know,
it's very true.
80s spin,
80s
when Marty
spin.
goes into the bar and spins like Michael Jackson.
Yes, very nicely done. Also known as Clint Eastwood. Gibbsy, Back to the Future 3, mate. What do you think of it?
It's still. I prefer it over the second one, mainly because in that one there's a bunch of the time jumps and all that sort of thing. But with this one, you get a almost a completely different story, but with some of the recurring characters from the previous two films, and you also get to see returning actors like Thomas F. Wilson and Leah Thompson portray different characters in that setting too. Speaking of which, actually, man, on a rewatch recently, Thomas F. Wilson, I feel like he goes into just one of his own throughout this movie.
Oh yeah.
I don't know about you guys, but I absolutely loved his energy, his enthusiasm for the role of Buford Mad Dog Tannen.
Mad Dog. You know, I hate that name. It's such a great character because it just kind of, once again, it's teased in Back to the Future 2, isn't it? There's kind of amazing continuity to these movies, and I love that, as you said, Thomas F. Wilson, like everyone, is getting to just have a free reign of these strange characters. And one of my favourite details in Back to the Future 3 is the kind of furnace shielding that Marty uses to protect himself during the shootout, which we see at the end.
And it is Clint Eastwood, isn't it?
Yeah, he calls himself Clint Eastwood.
So he calls himself Clint Eastwood, and he does the whole scene. It's perfect.
It's very nice. Because Joe, you obviously aptly said that it is a kind of homage to westerns, and one friend of mine said that he didn't like it for that very reason, and which obviously I would 100% disagree with. I think, in a way, this might sound really shallow-minded, but it is my favourite western movie. I just think it's fun how it doesn't really satirise westerns, but it just about pokes fun at them, like the whole idea of the homage of, you know, the wanderer walking into a town and everyone's spitting on the floor and watching him go by, and the that wonderful scene in which he's being yanked with a rope down the dusty street. It's got a real kind of it's a love letter, isn't it? That's probably the best way to describe it.
It's got some very nice details, and you get a nice idea as to what Hill Valley would have looked like 100 years prior. You see things like the construction of the clock tower at that point, as an example.
Because it all kind of connects together just about, doesn't it? Because we've kind of got to address the fact that people don't really like Back to the Future 3, and I just don't really understand it. I think it's a lovely conclusion.
All three films are brilliant. It's just, I think, like I say earlier, they just compare it to the first one, which you shouldn't do. Just take it, each one individually. Obviously, you combine them because they all have little references to one another, and like you say, foreshadowing. It's just a brilliant trilogy.
Because it does something interesting with the DeLorean as well, because you could argue when you look back at the first two movies, there is a reliance on the DeLorean as like a plot device, really. Yeah. Whereas this movie, the bloody hose or something gets cut from it, doesn't it?
Yeah, so the fuel line or something.
The fuel line, yeah. So it's completely redundant, null and void. And so that's just really interesting that he is truly stuck in that time period. And there's obviously Clara as a character. Joe, Clara, is that a character that you find annoying or great? Because it's two ends of the spectrum, really.
I've never actually thought about it, to be honest. It is what it is.
Clara!
Because obviously, your main concentration is on Doc and Marty. They're the boys. I don't know, I've never actually thought about it. She's just there.
Oh no! What do you think, Gibbsy? Because it is maybe one of the characters that, like I said, she's either annoying or great for people, and she's kind of in between for me, where she really does something to the movie that makes it good, but at the same time, is she really a great character?
I think she almost has an impact on the movie in the way that you'd expect in some places, where you've got Clara is introduced as Doc's love interest, a man who 10 minutes earlier into the film said, loving is very much against the ways of science.
Which is it's kind of like a Doc Brown thing to say, isn't it? And that's why I really like it. Isn't there that great scene as well where he's got his little kind of warehouse where he's doing all his work, and she kind of walks in with the telescope, isn't it? And somehow within that story they managed to write in ZZ Top.
I really enjoyed that little cameo. I saw at the beginning of the credits you have, this song performed by ZZ Top. Interesting, because they're one of my favourite late 80s rock bands. And so it was nice to see them come in a completely different style to what they're used to creating, I will add. Well.
Literally every time me and my dad watch it, when it gets to that scene, he just looks at me and goes, "That's ZZ Top." it's just like every time I'm just like, yeah, I know.
That sticks out in my mind as one of the best scenes in the film because it's really well edited. I think it's the overlay of the music and the fact that Clara and Emmett are just about to dance, and it's actually a really endearing scene.
But it's one of those really heartwarming scenes where you see them dance for the first time. You think, things are working out quite nice. Excuse me, quite nicely. Clara's being escorted to her house for the first time, and Emmett's on her doorstep. She asks, "What sort of scientist are you?" "I'm a student of all sciences, really." You just get that look in his eyes that he's just infatuated with this girl.
And there's actually a surprising kind of, I'd love to know what you guys think, because there's this emotional weight to it when Emmett knows he's got to go back to the future and leave her behind. And it's actually kind of a well-acted scene.
Just trying to think of the scene again.
So Joe, obviously Emmett and Charlie, what's it called, Charlie? Marty.
Charlie McFly.
Charlie. This will stay. Emmett and I've just said it again. Emmett and Marty know they have to go back to the future, and so Emmett realizes he should at least go and tell Clara.
He goes to her, and she doesn't believe him.
Yeah, it's kind of a lovely scene. It's really well done.
Yeah, it is.
Welcome to Monday Movies Dementia Edition, where Joe tries to remember the movie.
Like I say earlier, it is what it is. Like, she's there. Yeah, I didn't really take it in. I was just like, yeah, he's doing the right thing. She don't believe him. That's the point where he goes to the bar in it, and then he gets drunk, and then she overhears the guys in the train, and then she goes back.
Firstly, we need to mention Wake Up Juice. There's a part of me that wants to try Wake Up Juice, but I know it's going to kill my insides.
I don't want to try that at all.
What's the quote? "Jerry, let's get him some Wake Up Juice."
Something like that, yeah. Where the bartender
what's in it.
I almost don't want to know what's in it. If it made Doc that state for however long.
It looks horrible, but it wakes him up quick enough, doesn't it? With one of the most well-acted face-to-camera scenes I've ever known.
Dunks his head in the horse trough.
It doesn't seem unnatural in any way, though, which is one of the things I really liked about that, where you've got Doc just running out the sound. He looks around, he's the horse shop. He's like, "Let's go that way."
It's great. It's so funny. It's the sound effect as well of his head hitting the water that's quite funny. But we need to get back to the point as well, Joe, that this film is obviously a love letter to Westerns, but at the same time kind of poking fun at them in a way just how repetitive and kind of creatively redundant they are. Mm-hmm. Do you like the chase scene with the train?
What, when she's like going after it on the horse?
Yeah, which is a beautiful description of it, Joe. Because the first thing I think of when I watch that chase scene with the train is Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, which is not necessarily something you want to think of, because Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome is something you used to wipe your arse with, really. But I do, as an action film, I think it's equally as interesting as a time travel film, and I really like that action sequence. I think it really comes together.
You mentioned in a couple of previous episodes that Back to the Future, the films aren't necessarily action films, but you've got a couple of these really nicely placed and well written chase scenes that just add a bit of tension in where it's most needed.
When it comes to flaws as well, guys, what do you think lets the film down? Because it's certainly not a perfect film, and there's one particular scene that always leaves me on a bit of a dour note.
I think I'm looking at my niggles section on my notes. Marty has just arrived in 1885 and is being chased by the cowboys and Indians.
Okay.
I thought that scene seemed a bit sort of I don't know, because you arrive and the car has arrived and it's right at the front of the horse pack or whatever, and then you go to cross the next scene and they're suddenly about 300 yards further back. I thought something like that was a bit strange.
That irritates me every time I watch it. I'm just like, oh, just move past it, Joe.
Yeah, it's a slight continuity error, isn't it?
Yeah, that was the only thing I could really pick up.
Fair enough. How about you, Joe?
I know where you're coming from, because you do watch it and you feel like it is lacking something, but you just don't know what.
Yeah, I think it's because the first one is so brilliant, isn't it? Right. So the sequels are underrated, but in some sense they do lack that sort of kind of stupid magic to it, don't they?
Yeah, it's like the first one. I literally can't pick holes in it at all. I wouldn't change it whatsoever. I would maybe add more like 80s and 50s fashion in there, just like more like outfits. But that's literally like, as the story, I think it's perfect. I literally wouldn't change it.
Because Back to the Future 3 for me is the one film in the trilogy where the first two movies end superbly. I mean, the first one has a real sense of finality to it, even though it leads into a sequel, and the second one is the same. I don't like the ending to Part 3. I think it's just really strange, and it's that kind of Doc Brown has suddenly invented this time travel train. I just can't.
Destroys the DeLorean. Well, the DeLorean gets destroyed, so you're like, oh, okay. And then he just pops out of nowhere with the train, and you're like, oh. Okay.
You don't know how to feel, do you? So
yeah,
you agree.
You just don't know how to react to that. It is what it is. It's just like, oh, maybe the DeLorean was just not as unique as we thought it was.
If you can just replicate it again, then would you have needed to have had it in the DeLorean in the first place?
Yeah, exactly.
But there's just something about that finale that, while I love Back to the Future 3, it just ends on such a bizarre note, and you can't look past it. I don't know what it is. It really brings the film down a bit for me.
I think it's a case of letting the audience know that that Doc isn't entirely stuck in the ages of the Old West, and that he's here and he's able to travel around, and things do go well for him, as you see he's with Clara, and is at the time his two kids, Jules and Verne, named after his favourite author, Jules Verne.
Obviously, we're coming to an end on this episode, but one thing we've got to mention quickly is the fact that, once again, this ending kind of doesn't justify its own existence, because the whole point is Doc Brown has made the decision to stay in the past, hasn't he, with Clara? Yeah. And so this whole time travel thing to bring him back kind of undoes that whole character arc, doesn't it? Yeah. That sacrifice. What do you think of it?
Yeah, that's it. It's like, I'd hate to pick holes in such a great trilogy, but you are right. It's like that ending just didn't feel quite right, especially with Doc's character. It's just like, I don't know if they could have just written a better ending. Like, he could have let Marty know how he was getting on a different way. A letter would have been repetitive, but
we'll just leave it. We'll just leave it.
Leave the mystery. Yeah, you could let the audience just come up with their own ending. Just have Marty there with his memories, and just he goes off and leads his life with Jennifer. Yeah.
I did think it was quite strange coming from the man that had said in 2 and 3 to destroy the time machine as soon as you get back to 1985. Destroy the time machine. I should have never created that infernal time machine. To quote 100%. Him, to quote Doc, and then suddenly for him to reappear with another time machine. It's quite strange. It would have been a nice way if you see the destroyed DeLorean, you sort of see Marty go like, oh well, farewell Doc, it's been, these times been good or whatever. I don't know if he looks up to the sky then perhaps, and then you get a shot of Doc in the past, like, farewell Marty.
What I would have done is maybe do what Chris Nolan would have done if he directed Back to the Future 3, which is, do you know Chris Nolan, Joe? Not Joe, Gibbsy, do you know Chris Nolan?
Is he the director of films such as Dunkirk and
That's the one.
Interstellar? things like that.
He likes to use montages a lot to close off his endings, maybe more so than he should do, really, because it gets a bit repetitive after a while. But I personally would have loved a Back to the Future 3 ending that kind of constantly contrasts how Marty is living his life with Jennifer and how Doc is living his life with Clara, and it kind of ends on a really nice note where they're still friends, but they're just in different periods of their lives, literally in different periods. And that kind of closes it off really nicely and then leave it at that. I would argue, I've just thought of it here, I think Back to the Future 3 for me is the Alien 3 of the franchise, in that it goes back to the kind of simple structure of the first movie, in that it kind of follows the same beat of going back, to the past and having to come back to the future, whereas the sequel, Back to the Future 2, is obviously a little bit more complex structurally, isn't it? I think we can all agree on that. But I still love it. I think it's a flawed film, as we've all said. Back to the Future 3 is in no way a perfect film. But the reason why it still holds up for me, especially, is because I remember watching this a lot as a kid, especially the whole trilogy. And I was shocked that I rewatched it recently, and I still thoroughly enjoyed it. As not only a fan of the Back to the Future movies, but as a fan of just storytelling in general.
That's the thing, though, that just to continue off what you were saying, for me, films, like, you either like them or you don't, and they're there to basically, they're entertainment. They are literally fun and very good piece of filmmaking. You get the best of both worlds.
Guys, thank you so much for listening to another episode of Monday Movies. Today we have been joined by Joe Husband. Joe, where can we find you on the internet?
Oh, mate, I'm not really like on public stuff.
How about your film channel, you twat?
I mean, I suppose you could plug JD Films in there. Wink, wink.
So I'm most active nowadays on my YouTube channel, TGMA Productions, where I will also be uploading this episode. I do primarily music-related stuff, whether it's my own work and compositions, or whether it's just music for people to listen to for their own sake. I'll put a link in the description to Stan's channel and Twitter as well, and JD Films as well for you, Joe. So you can find the two of them each in the description. Fantastic.
You can also find me on Twitter at Stand Wilks 10, where I just kind of post random stuff about random movies and promote Monday Movies and all that jazz. I've got some short films on my channel as well as some music, maybe not as sophisticated as the great Better Call Gibbsy, but it does the job. Guys, thank you so much for your time, and we shall see you in the next episode. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Gibbsy.
Thank you. Bye.
See you next week.